Today we are joined by Jace, co-founder of Action Studios, a company that recently celebrated its impressive 10-year milestone in the competitive film and media industry. Jace and his partner have successfully navigated their business through challenging times, including the COVID pandemic, and are now working with major brands like Doritos, even winning a Super Bowl commercial and partnering on projects for films like Mickey 17. Starting with a dream of creating feature films and TV shows, Jace has built a multifaceted business that spans advertisement, social media, and their movie branch called Reverie. Welcome, Jace. Excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jace, tell me, after a decade in the industry and reaching that point where you're now collaborating with global brands, what's been the most unexpected lesson you've learned about sustaining creative vision while building a commercially successful production company?
That's a good question. I feel like that's just kind of over the years has been part of the craft, is figuring out how to keep the creative side of it going while also building the business. I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of work of the trade. I feel like over the time you kind of find a voice in it. And I feel like each project that we do, we just try to figure out the best way that we can approach creativity in the way that we can serve the client best while also having fun at what we're doing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we don't just get better over years, we get better in circles, which is the start of the project and by the end of the project where we must have learned something new each time, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Jace, what do you think is as a market is happening right now? Is there a shift? Or is it largely the same as it was when you started?
Um, yes and no. I feel like the market for sure, at least in the commercial space, has shifted a little bit with social media and whatnot. I think that you're seeing a big surge in commercials that are going for vertical versus horizontal versus like YouTube and broadcasting. Because a lot of the stuff that we do now, we don't really go or work in the TV and like broadcasting space. We've done it once or twice now, but for the most part, a lot of what we're doing is in the social media space. And I think as social media is still, I mean, it's still relatively new. I think that there's different strategies that kind of come up that feel like almost every other month. There's like a new strategy when it comes to social media and advertising and having to adapt to that. But I feel like the core of it is relatively the same. Like when it comes to commercials, like the main point is to drive emotion no matter what it is. So even if it's on YouTube, if it's on social media platforms, whatever, the point of advertising is just trying to appeal to the audience's emotions, rather that's making them laugh, cry, or feel something. You're driving them towards people having an emotional tie to that product. So that doesn't really change. But I think that the mediums in which these platforms, how they work, like you're going to make a YouTube ad that's different than a TikTok ad now, that's different than an Instagram ad. And the strategies behind that are relatively the same, like storytelling wise, it's relatively the same, but the way that you approach it are going to be different. So I feel like in that regard, there's a big shift on at least on the ad space and where people are spending their dollar and how they're spending their dollar, and then what's important versus what's not important for their brand. So I feel like it's changing almost every day, but at the core of it, it's still the same. And I think once you realize, okay, at the core, what do we have to do to advertise a product, then it will kind of stay the same, even though the waters kind of shift and change and whatnot. So
Yeah, interesting. And do you feel like the waters change depending on the audience preferences, or is it just really these media platforms changing it around to experiment what works and what doesn't?
yes and no. I feel like audiences do tend to change because as we're consuming more media than we've ever consumed before, the way in which we want to see certain things or engage in media is a little bit different. But again, at the core, I think if you can make somebody laugh or if you can make somebody feel something, then, that again, that still kind of stays the same. And then I think that the way that these social media platforms are kind of working, the way that the algorithms work, does kind of dictate what works and what doesn't work. And I think another thing that we've recognized as you're trying to navigate the social media space and stuff like that is the difference between, again, what is a vertical ad versus a horizontal ad versus something else. And the way in which you need to approach each one of those media platforms do change as the platform changes. And you just kind of have to adapt because, again, if you're scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, your ads is so scrollable versus YouTube, you have 5 seconds to grab somebody's attention. And so that kind of varies and changes.
Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day and he described it as thumb stopping. Most of your content needs to be thumb stopping now, and it's not enough if it isn't. Jace, what is your competitive landscape look like? Where do you feel like your business is stands along with the competition right now? Do you feel like there's a bit of a race there with regards to the type of customers and clients you want to go for?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're a relatively young business, and so we're still kind of in the new space. So we're definitely still on the like grind mode of a small business trying to compete with larger businesses. But one thing that's been really fascinating for us, at least in this space, is that we've been able to show our ability to create ads at a pretty low cost. I think the Super Bowl victory was kind of a relatively interesting thing to look at because in when it came to all the Super Bowl ads, most people were spending upwards of $1 million+ to advertise, and we did it for under like $100,000. We were in like the 50K range compared to everybody else spending $1 million. We were able to produce something. I think that people are starting to recognize that with our company. We're more in the space right now where people don't really know that we exist as much. Like the inner circle that we have and the people that come to us and the way that we're getting traction via word of mouth is fantastic. But frankly, I think that people just don't know that we're here yet. And that's where we're trying to compete against big brands where it's like big brands have the advertising money to advertise that they're, a really big company. We don't. But when you discover us and you realize that we can produce the same thing that these bigger companies are, then that's when people start wanting to work with us. Hence why we did the stuff with Twitch recently and for the Mickey 17.
What are some of the key takeaways from the Super Bowl ad with regards to, you winning the competition, which were again with the millions, and how could you stand out?
I think the biggest thing I learned was just like a team effort because that was definitely a team effort because it was led by buddies of mine, Nate and Dylan, who came to us originally to help create the idea. And a lot of that was just kind of a collaboration in understanding where to pull really good talent from. And when there's a good idea that when people want to rally behind it, that's what's going to create one of the best things. And I think through that whole experience, I think what we recognize is again, good story is going to be a good story. Yeah, maybe we don't have A-list talent like everybody else did, but it doesn't matter because if you can make somebody laugh, then you won, right? And so I think through that whole experience, I think the biggest thing that we learned is a good idea is going to be a good idea. And it all starts with the writing and the idea. Like nowadays, everybody can make films or commercials look like $1 million. But I think that we're living in an age now where as long as the idea is really, really strong, like then you're going to beat out most people. And I think that's one thing that we recognized there was that, yeah, we saw that there was a lot of other competitors that looked really good, but at the end of the day, the best idea is what won. And so I think that was encouraging as a creative to recognize that even in the tsunami of big budget and corporate and all that stuff, a small group of, guy friends can come together and just come up with something funny. And because the idea is good, it wins. Right. And so I think that was encouraging to see as a creative is that, good creative and good writing is going to win no matter what, even if you're against millions of dollars being spent.
Yeah, amazing. And it just goes to show that it's the fundamentals, right? That's always what's made these amazing films that have become classics today win. It wasn't just the beautiful images. Yes, they're part of it. Idea has always been the key. Jace, what are you currently spending most of your energy and focus on in the business right now?
Not as focused as I should be. I feel like I'm splitting my attention in three different ways, but right now it's just scaling the commercial company, and then on the side is pushing for all the TV shows that we're pitching right now. So we're actually in a really unique spot right now where the company for ads is growing faster than it used to, and I think it's probably because of the Super Bowl stuff and a few other projects that we did, and we're just kind of at our 5 year mark. It typically takes 3 to 5 years for a business to like really get its feet underneath itself. But I think we're right at that intersection between our ads company is starting to grow, and then we got our first pitches for our TV show, and so we're kind of just waiting for the green light with those now, which that's kind of what we've been aiming for a very long time. So my attention's kind of split between building company for the ad space while also pitching for the TV show and movie side of stuff. So that's where my attention right now is super focused.
Brilliant. And how are you going to be able to balance that? What's the balance now in terms of time and attention and versus what it's going to be like in the future once everything's greenlit?
I would hope that my time would free up, but I know it's only going to get more booked, unfortunately. But also, fortunately, I think if the movie stuff starts to take off, we will be in writers' rooms and pitch stuff and directorial stuff. And while we're shooting the show, we're also going to be trying to figure out how to keep the company growing as we're growing it. So I think my time's just going to get more stretched, which is why I think it's important to start at our stage of the game. It's really important to start figuring out your systems and your pipelines. And then that's kind of where you start hiring out to make sure that the machine is still running. And so I think a lot of our next few months here, depending on if the show gets picked up and depending on if the company keeps growing, a lot of it's going to be focusing our attention on, okay, how do we scale this thing and how do we put people in place to make sure that it's running efficiently? And what does it look like to make that happen?
Absolutely. And scaling, part of scaling is about just locking in on people, process management. I think these are the three core aspects to business. And with the scaling aspect, why do you feel like as you get into film aspect as well, that it's important to maintain that growth that you have in the company right now?
I think a few reasons, and I'm not like an expert in it because obviously, like, I am just getting into the like TV space as we're doing stuff. But from what I've seen so far, when it comes to pitching and creating movies and TV shows, every movie and every TV show that gets made is a miracle, just because there's so much effort and so much time and so much collaboration and so much deal making that's going on that it's really difficult to make something, especially if you're not like Disney or Apple TV, who just has a lot of money to throw at stuff. And so there's a lot of waiting period. And so even though, let's say we get the first show and it's really successful, I think between that show and the next show that we pitch, there's still a really large gap. And so the question for us is, what should we be doing in that gap? And if you can have a business that's running, that subsidizes infrastructure and money, that kind of just cash flow coming in during those waiting periods between the shows, you at least have something that's growing and scaling while you're waiting for your big ticket items to come in. There's a world where if the TV stuff just takes off so well that we might just need to take a pause on the commercial stuff and kind of shift our attention. But I feel like multiple streams of incomes and multiple like businesses that can run and function. I mean, that's how you scale and you create generational wealth, right? But I think once we really get our feet in the water, I'm sure our strategies are going to pivot and adjust and change, and our time might be so split that maybe we can't do both if we don't set up the system correctly. So.
Absolutely. And when you say we might not be able to do both, it means, TV shows and the film aspect would take priority over the business.
Yeah, I think for us, our goal it's funny, we started the company because we needed a way to pay ourselves and grow a team and a company while we were trying to get to the movie space. And movies just take so long, and it's about who you know, and it's trying to get your foot in the door. And so you just have to be knocking on the door constantly. And so the commercial stuff came about because we just needed income. Lo and behold, as we started doing commercials, I started actually enjoying it because it became a place to practice what we want to do in movies. And actually, so if you
Yeah.
look at a lot of our commercials, you'll probably see a lot of ties to the way that we're pitching our films. And I honestly, one of the shows that we're working on right now, if it gets greenlit, you'll look at our commercials and you'll look at the show and you'll be like, oh, they were just using all of this to practice for their show. And so I've kind of learned to enjoy commercials in that sense, where it's just like it's a time to practice techniques and just working on your craft, right?
100%. Now, tell me, what is happening in the next 6 to 12 months, other than obviously the creative aspects and trying to get your shows greenlit? What is happening with regards to the business and the scaling perspective?
Right now, the system, I mean, I don't really know about 12 months out, but I think within the next like 3 months, our goal is to start scaling the social media side of things. We work with a lot of YouTubers, and I've been in the social media space kind of behind the camera and on camera. We used to do like TikTok videos and Instagram videos that would go viral. They would get like 5, 12, even we have some that were up in the 30 millions of views. I didn't really see a passion for it though, because I wanted to go for movies. But I think now that our company's growing, I'm seeing social media as a way to help scale our business, and also to help kind of create a personal brand because we're also living in an era now where I feel like people want genuine human connection. And so it's a lot easier to work with a personal brand than it is to work with a big corporate brand. Because when you think big corporate, you're like, I don't really know who to talk to. Versus if it was Jace Hardwick and his team, then you're like, okay, I want to work with Jace and his team, and that's kind of what we're seeing with a lot of the big social media people is that, I mean, like Mr. Beast is a good example of like he is his own personal brand. And so are a lot of other large YouTubers. And so I think the next 3 months for us is trying to build out the social media space and kind of get that machine going, and figuring out how to tackle YouTube and vertical right now for our own personal growth.
Absolutely. Almost all businesses could use free organic marketing, and that's just TikTok, right? So I'd
Mhm.
actually want to touch on some of your success on TikTok as well. You mentioned you've got a few videos that achieved the M's. Tell me how you were consistently able to do that.
A lot of that was trial and error. It's funny because if you go look back at our really old TikToks that we like started off on, the one that blew us up was this lemon trend that I'm like 95% sure we started the trend, where people just like use a sword really quickly and then the lemon cuts in half and then all of a sudden you saw a bunch of social media people do it. And so for a little bit we were known as like the lemon guys. And then we started noticing a trend between VFX and comedy. It was very likened to Zach King stuff. If you know Zach King is like the big magic man on TikTok. And we got to work with him a lot when I was going through college. And I was really inspired by Zach. And so I recognized, okay, not a lot of people can do this like VFX comedy thing. He definitely had the niche for VFX and like magic on the internet. And so I think I got really inspired by that. He even gave me a book called Steal Like an Artist a long time ago where it's like, okay,
Nice.
who do you really look up to and what can you take from them, but then make it your own. And I think that that's kind of what we saw was, oh, if we take the VFX stuff that Zach's doing, but we add our own comedy because we just like doing comedy, mix those two together. And that's kind of what we do best. And we just started seeing success because one, not a lot of people could do VFX on set. And then two, I just don't think a lot of people could execute the comedy that we were at least trying to execute. So a lot of the videos that went viral were because of that mixture of VFX and our comedy. And then we kind of just translated that into bigger ads. Like really, you see those TikToks, and that was kind of like the testing ground for us to do big ads. And then the ads started working, and it's kind of similar to the way that we're trying to write for TV stuff. So there's definitely like a vibe. And it's funny, I was like talking to somebody the other day, and I think that we've kind of boiled it down to we make cartoon humor come to life in live action. Because a lot of our stuff is very slapsticky in a way where it's people getting hurt but not gruesome, where it kind of breaks the bounds of reality, but in a fun and goofy way that you would see with like Tom and Jerry. And I after we started talking about that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's kind of the way that we do stuff.
Brilliant. I love it. And really, the science behind it, Jace, is obviously going to stay the same, right? You've got a lead and you've got a hook. And if you can master how to capture the audience's attention within 3 seconds, you can nail it. With the short form work from TikToks and Instagrams, you've got even less time. And if you can master that, then you can get a little bit better in the commercial side, and so on and so forth with the film and longer form. So that's interesting how you've been able to build that little muscle memory of yours. Jace, what are some of the metrics in the business that you're trying to work on this year?
A lot of it's just like the financial. I think we're looking at metrics where it's like, okay, how do we pay ourselves well, but also make sure that we're moving money in ways that we can invest. A big method that we're working on right now is called Profit First Method. It's a financial book. I think a lot of people have read it, but it's a really good foundation, I think, for company stuff. I'm sure there's other ways that you could do it, but we started looking at that method of like, okay, how do we make sure that the company's making profit? but then also we're putting aside money that lets the company operate. So we kind of just been focusing on building those metrics more right now, which is how do we build up our, which is called OpEx, that runs the business, and then how much profit can we put into the business, and then once we have X amount of dollars, what do we use to, well, how do we use that to invest back into the company? And I think it kind of ties into, okay, how do I scale the metric of getting more sales and more organic traffic, especially because of the vein that we're in. I was also having another meeting with somebody else, and we're in a unique spot where we're not getting the like K, 10K, 15K deals with commercials. We're aiming for really big brands, and you can really only get those big brands through like two different ways, which is you either have an agent that's striking these really big 100K deals for these really big brands, or these some of these people that work at these companies see your organic stuff and they say these guys are really good, we want to work with them. Because I'm kind of finding that there's a certain cap on some businesses where if they're like, you know, 500,000 and under, or they're in the 100K range and they're like startups, they only have so much budget on the commercial side. But the second you start crossing the threshold of 100,000, $500,000 companies or up to $1 million companies, it starts to get a little bit different in their metrics. But they typically already have teams that they work with or people that other big major companies that they want to work with because those major companies are in the same level that they are at. And so what we're finding right now in our metrics is how do I organically meet some of these bigger players and their agents or their marketing teams? Because they're not going to just see an ad on social media and be like, oh, let's hire these guys. It's going to come through bigger negotiation. And so one metric I'm looking at is like, okay, do we get represented? Another way to do it is to go down the social media route and kind of let them just organically discover that you're really good and then get a call. Because I don't think if they just saw like an advertisement for it, they're going to be like, okay, let's hire this team. I think it's going to come more through the handshakes and in person. And so those are other two metrics that we're looking at. So first is the financial. How do we build that up? Take that. What do we invest in? Let's invest in getting in-person meetings, but also in the social media space. And how do we organically grow that?
Yeah, I'm glad you've set your business in a way where you're not just on autopilot, right? And which way we see a lot of especially creatives doing that. Now, especially with regards to some of the points you made earlier about really having a nice cash flow, and because some of your priorities are scaling the business, it really makes sense to have that because once you have good cash flow, you can hire and you can go really bullish on hiring A-team players so that you can step away a little bit and focus on strategizing in the business. But
Yeah,
Jace,
exactly.
tell me, what's something that you've tried before that may or may not have worked with regards to some of the new strategies that you've been coming up with?
I think we've tried. So I think we've tried in the social media space. We've tried, and really quickly we've learned that at the scale that we want to do stuff, if you don't look at YouTube and socials as its own machine and its own kind of micro business, a lot of stuff can kind of get left in the wind. And we've tried to start social media a lot. And without us being like, no, we're actually going to have like a dedicated team to this, it tends to die, at least in our space, because I can't focus on more than three major things at one time or two major things. And so if I don't have a lead who's going to help me generate that stuff on the social media side, then it's too much for us to take on if we're trying to, you know, steer the ship in too many different directions, right? It's like, don't try to chase two different rabbits at the same time. You won't catch either one. Um, and
Yeah.
so I've seen that. So it's like looking at everything that we're trying to start with efficiency and what is the pipeline for it and how would you run the system. So looking at that. And I think another thing that I've seen in the past, at least for us on the commercial side, is understanding the metric between creative and the finance. I think when we were first starting out, our ideas were way too big for the amount of budgets that we were working with at the very start of our career. And so I think a big thing that we have recently shifted in the past like year and a half has been making sure that we understand that the creative can match the budget of the commercial. And I think that's a metric that we've been also trying to figure out and work on, is that making sure that the ideas are within reason because we just want to aim big every single time. I think that's also why we're trying to aim for bigger and bigger brands, because the more money we were able to work with, the more we were actually able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And so I think for us, it was just kind of getting more realistic and being like, okay, this is a great idea. It would crush, but we need an extra $50,000 to pull it off. So there's just no way.
Hmm.
So, what is a same but different version of that same thing? Like, can you take the $100,000 approach and the core of why you like that, take what was good about it and put it in like a 30K budget or a 20K budget ad and still pull off something that people are going to watch? I think once we started identifying how to do that, I think that's where we started to see more growth and more success in what we were doing and better metrics. And so I think that's one thing that we started to adjust, because I think we didn't necessarily fail at the beginnings, but sometimes the ads themselves would look really good. And to the average viewer, I think they would say it was really good. But to us internally, we're like, it just didn't hit as well as it should have. And that kind of comes down to, oh, our idea was way too big and the budget didn't match. So how do we scale down the creative without losing the core of why the big idea would work so well? So I think that's one thing that we have been focusing on and changing, is matching that.
Interesting. That's quite interesting how you paint the sort of disparity or the discrepancy between the creative and the budget. Now, just tell me what's priority number one? What's screaming at you? What needs to happen now in order for you to really scale sustainably?
Organization. I think we have to figure out our systems right now. We're in a bend and stretch phase, and typically you hear this with companies that go from certain metrics with their financials, going for the first from the first $100,000 to 200,000 to half a million. I think we're in a weird space right now where we don't have quite enough coming in to build out a stronger pipeline, but taking on just enough to where the internal team right now is stretched very thin. And so we're one or two I feel like one or two clients away from us crossing the threshold to being like, okay, now we can reasonably pay employees or people to come in and help the machine continue to work. So I think right now that's kind of the thing that's like screaming at me, where it's like, okay, we need to fix our pipeline. So
Gotcha. And what's that pipeline look like in terms of the length it is in like 1 year's, 2 years time? How do you see that cash flow work with that pipeline?
I think within 6 months we'll have it. I'm hoping to do it in 3. Internally, we've been looking at the thing that we've been trying to do is identify the problems in our current pipeline, ones that are like, obviously, if you had more money, great, you could fix it. But what are like the immediate things that are holding us back? And right now, a lot of it is me and my producer's time just needs to be spent more on the front end with creative and being a CEO. A lot of times where the pipeline breaks is when we have to step in and physically do the work ourselves on the post production side, as well as sometimes on the creative. Like right now, we're taking on enough clients to where we're starting to outsource to other directors. But what two things that I would really love is to start hiring an in-house editor and a VFX artist, because we get inquiries for VFX all the time, every day. I'm pretty sure we got like 3 today, 5 yesterday. So it's like, okay, we just can't take on the amount of work at a certain point. And then editing just slows us down. You need to keep the creatives on the front end, the creatives, and let somebody who's just really good on the back end edit. And then I think on the front end, it's finding more people that understand or train them to understand what our model of comedy VFX in action is, because we have hired in the past and they do a really good job, but it's definitely just not like an action studios video. And then there's some directors we've hired where we're like, yep, you guys got it. You understand the feeling, you understand the comedy, you understand how to do the VFX. So like those are people that I would hire. So I think right now those are our two areas that I'm trying to figure out how to basically either hire full time or how do I run an efficient pipeline with contractors. So
Gotcha. And you're right. At a certain point, you just got to say no to all these leads that are coming through that don't really move the needle for the business overall, because that's just a one sure way to really burn out in the business, taking on any and everyone. So I can totally get why you're trying to work with selective and high value clients at the same time, right? Jace, where does it leave you in the business when you don't really having to take on these types of clients for the cash flow.
Sorry, could you repeat it one more time?
Yeah. So what does that sort of mean for the business when you do have to take on some of these clients just for cash flow purposes? I mean, just for any business in general, what does it mean?
Every time we do that, I mean, I guess it slows us down on the movie side, right? So if we need to take on
Yeah.
more clients for cash flow stuff, it slows us down on which the major pursuit, which is trying to get to movies and trying to push the movie side of stuff. I think it just slows us down there. And then if we try to take on more clients, it just means more of my time being taken up in areas. But to boil that down, I think really what it takes away from is us being able to pursue more of the movie stuff. Because the more my time gets opened up, the more time we have for creative and more time to pitch our shows. Because a lot of times I just need time to go meet with people and tell them, here's our show, and to build out the pitch decks that we need. So I think that's what slows us down, at least on that regard.
Amazing. This has been lovely, Jace. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and where you are as a business and how you're trying to scale and what's going on in your mind right now. It's a great position to be in, and I feel like in another year, this will be another conversation for sure.
Well, thank you for having me.